Good morning, everyone. Today is the 8th of December 2021. Time now is about 10:30 a.m. It is on this day 80 years ago that the Japanese troops landed here in KUALA AMAT, Kota Bharu, Kelantan, thus beginning the Pacific War of 1941. 1 hour and a half before Pearl Harbor was attacked, this is the very spot where the Japanese troops conducted their amphibious landing and attacked Kota Bharu Airport. Kota Bharu Airport is about a kilometer inland. We are fortunate because the authors, the architect of the attacks themselves had written books about the attack into Malaya, specifically the attack in Kota Bharu, describing in detail what happened and how it happened. Now, the attack started at about 12:30 midnight on 8th of December. The landings began about 1 a.m. They started to land. They started to disembark from their cargo ships, from their landing ship into their small rivercraft landing ships. Now, it is not just a matter of from the big ship we go down to the small ship and then land at this beach. It's not as easy as that. You see, now it is the month of December. It is the monsoon month. The waves are high and the seas are very rough. And I quote, this is the book. This is the book called Singapore, the Japanese Version, written by Colonel Masanobu Tsuji. He is I would dare say, the architect that planned the Malayan invasion. And this is what he had to say about the Kota Bharu landing. The officers and men of our engineer detachment, standing at the rail of the ship, watched the seas dashing against the side of the ship and said with scolding voices, "It's useless, isn't it? What fools to think of disembarkation in such heavy seas. The seas were at least 3 meters high, possibly higher. In peacetime maneuvers, men would not have been exposed to the danger of transshipment of such circumstance." Now these were the challenges that they faced. Even before they reached the British pillboxes, the Indians of the if I recall correctly, it was the 8th or the 11th Regiment waiting for them. Even before all that, even before a single shot was fired, this is what they had to face. You know, they say in war, you don't only fight your enemies, you also have to fight the elements. And this is the elements that they had to face. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at behind you, the seas is nothing to joke about. It's high waves. Imagine in full battle gear with heavy knapsacks and your main firearm, your sidearm, your ammunition, your life equipment, rations and all. That alone, I would say, probably take about that alone would take easily between 5 to 10 kilos of extra weight. And here you are trying to disembark into a small landing craft with waves 3 meters high. 3 meters high. We can only imagine such hardship and such grudging respect, dedication that we have to give to the Japanese for committing and being able to do such act of dedication, I would say. Here is one of the few small river outlets that leads into the sea of Kuala Amat. When the Japanese face stiff resistance on the beaches, I believe one of the tactics they use is that they use their landing crafts to outflank the defenders, the Indians and the Dogras and the Sikhs regiments. They outflank those fortifications, and they use this, I guess, a small river tributary, and flank the pillboxes, and thus cutting those pillboxes from the airport. Therefore, the pillboxes had to fight on two fronts. So because they had to fight on two fronts, it became untenable for them to fight on, and thus that's the reason why the pillboxes did not manage to hold against the Japanese invasion. One would have to imagine, what would have happened if the pillboxes held? What if when the Japanese invaded, and then they were repelled at the beaches? It would have been a different Malaya. It probably would have been a different Malaysia. We are now currently walking inside Kuala Amat Creek. Not much has changed in the past 80 years. Small dense foliage, waterways everywhere, water clog everywhere. One monitor lizard nearly bit me just now. Well, he was shocked as much as I am. So yeah, let's. So this is what the Japanese had to contend with, on top of all the firepower British Empire had to offer to them. So let's keep on walking and let's check out how it looks like. The terrain has not changed much in the past 80 years except for the erosion that had occurred. Come, let's see how it looks like, how it must have felt like to be a Japanese soldier creeping along Kuala Amat. See, ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of terrain that the Japanese had to endure. Yeah. Marshes, swamp. Must have been raining that day because it's in the monsoon. So they would have been soaking wet, burdened by their equipment, and they would have been miserable. In fact, if the US should have learned that if the Japanese were willing to endure this, then definitely they would have been willing to endure more to defend their home islands in the Okinawa and Iwo Jima and such. Yeah. No tar road back then. The Japanese lost more men in trying to land at Kuala Amat and Sabah, and essentially the Japanese had lost more in trying to land at Kota Bharu than any other casualties in the whole Malayan campaign. If they had suffered losses, this is the biggest place where they suffered losses. And when you realize that that the British do know that the Japanese were coming. Look, there were pillboxes ready for them. You know, there were barbed wires, there were men, soldiers. You have to realize that maybe it's a question of not enough not enough resources being put to defend Malaya. Of course, the British answer would be we were tied up with trying to defend Hitler from our own island itself. But well, I guess we were less important in the list, I guess. Okay, so we are now at a war memorial. The war memorial. I've been here a few times in Google Map. What does it say? Laman Pendaratan Jepun 1941. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the memorial for the Japanese landing, erected I guess a few years ago. The actual landings were further up in front. Much of it has been eroded by the sea. This is the memorial. The landings happen here because the airport is about a kilometer that way. When the Japanese landed, they were guided by the airport lights, conveniently, and also they had their own men supporting them and people from the Tortoise Society. So from the beach, about half a kilometer in front of us, they then made their way to the airport with much resistance by the British. When I say much resistance by the British, it is mainly from my understanding, is from the Indian and the Punjabs, and also from the 6 regiments of the British Empire at that time. This is where the Japanese suffered most of their losses. Throughout their Malayan campaign, this is the point where they suffered the most losses. They did not suffer as much losses in Jitra or in Batu Pahat, in Muar, in Kampar. They did not suffer as much as in Kota Bharu, Kelantan. There's also a few more. I believe there's one more war memorial erected by the Japanese servicemen after the war in memory of their fallen comrades here. That shows how much important the Kota Bharu landing is to the Japanese. We will walk a bit down that road to see how it was for the Japanese trying to secure the Kota Bharu airport, and see how the terrain was, and how the vegetation was, and what challenges that they had to face in trying to secure Kota Bharu airport. Why do they need Kota Bharu airport? It's because they need Kota Bharu airport to establish a beachhead, number one. Number two, they need Kota Bharu airport to ensure that they have fighter support or fighter coverage for their Malayan campaign. Once they had Kota Bharu airport, then the rest became easier for them, because the British only had a few antiquated planes to defend the whole Malaya. So let's go and check it out.